Todos creían que Moscú caería en pocas semanas. Pero la guerra estaba a punto de tomar un giro que nadie imaginó.
Most devastating land campaign in human history. In the summer of 1941, Adolf Hitler launched Operation Barbarroja, a surprise invasion of the Soviet Union that stretched across thousands of miles. It was designed to deliver a swift and decisive victory, yet it would ultimately become the beginning of Germany's long road to defeat. The opening week stunned the world, but beneath the surface of rapid advances, hidden challenges were already threatening to reshape the course of the war. By early 1941, Hitler had turned his attention eastward. Although Germany and the Soviet Union were bound by a non-aggression pact, he had never abandoned his belief that Soviet territory held the resources and living space needed for Germany's future ambitions. Behind the scenes, months of careful planning transformed this vision into the largest military operation ever assembled. As German divisions quietly redeployed toward the eastern frontier, Soviet leader Joseph Stalin remained determined to avoid provoking conflict. Reports warning of an imminent invasion reached Moscow from several sources, but Stalin believed Germany would not risk opening another massive front while Britain remained unconquered. His confidence would soon be shattered. Before launching the invasion, Germany moved to secure its southern flank. Political instability in Yugoslavia and British influence in Greece threatened Hitler's strategic plans.
Todos creían que Moscú
In
caería
April
en pocas
1941,
semanas.
German forces
Pero la
swept through the
guerra
Balkans
estaba a
with
punto de
remarkable
tomar un
speed.
giro que nadie imaginó.
Yugoslavia collapsed within days, while Greece, despite British support, was quickly overrun. The victories cleared the final obstacle standing between Germany and its eastern campaign. On the morning of June 22, 1941, the silence along the border ended. Before sunrise, thousands of artillery pieces opened fire as aircraft crossed into Soviet airspace. Simultaneously, millions of soldiers advanced across a vast front extending from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. Operación Barbarroja had begun. The invasion was divided into three powerful thrusts. Army Group North advanced toward Leningrad, Army Group Center drove directly toward Moscow, and Army Group South targeted the fertile lands of Ukraine. German commanders believed speed and coordination would overwhelm Soviet defenses before they could fully respond. During the opening days, that expectation appeared justified. German armored divisions pushed deep into Soviet territory with astonishing momentum. Air superiority allowed the Luftwaffe to disrupt communications and destroy large numbers of aircraft on the ground. Soviet units, caught off guard and struggling with poor coordination, found themselves surrounded before they could organize effective resistance. Within a single week, enormous Soviet formations became trapped near Minsk. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers were taken prisoner as German forces continued pressing eastward. To many observers, the campaign looked unstoppable. Across Europe, the rapid advance reinforced the belief that Germany's military machine was unmatched. Yet behind these spectacular victories, warning signs were already emerging. Supply lines stretched farther each day across rough terrain, while infantry struggled to keep pace with fast-moving armored units. Soviet industry, manpower, and determination proved far greater than German planners had expected. Instead of collapsing, new Soviet formations continued appearing along the front. The early triumphs of Operation Barbarroja transformed the war, but they also created dangerous overconfidence. Germany had won remarkable victories, yet the campaign it expected to finish in months was quietly becoming a test of endurance. Ahead lay the vast distances of the Soviet Union, determined resistance, and strategic decisions that would change the fate of the Second World War forever. By the late summer of 1941, German forces stood closer to Moscow than anyone had believed possible. The Soviet capital, the political and symbolic heart of the nation, seemed within reach. Many German commanders argued that capturing the city quickly would cripple Soviet command and force a decisive victory. Yet at this critical moment, Adolf Hitler made one of the most debated decisions of the Second World War. Instead of concentrating every available force on Moscow, Hitler redirected powerful armored divisions toward Ukraine. His objective was to secure valuable agricultural land and destroy Soviet armies in the south before continuing the advance. The campaign around Kyiv produced another spectacular German victory, with hundreds of thousands of Soviet soldiers surrounded and captured. From a tactical perspective, it was an extraordinary success. Strategically, however, the delay gave the Soviet Union something far more valuable, time. As autumn arrived, Army Group Center resumed its drive toward Moscow. Initially, the offensive regained momentum, pushing Soviet defenders back once again. But the further German forces advanced, the more difficult their situation became. Supply lines stretched across hundreds of miles, roads deteriorated into thick mud after heavy rains, and fuel, food, and ammunition struggled to reach the front. The rapid blitzkrieg that had overwhelmed Western Europe was now slowing against the vast geography of the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, Joseph Stalin refused to abandon the capital. Defensive fortifications were constructed around Moscow as soldiers and civilians worked together under immense pressure. At the same time, Soviet intelligence delivered reassuring news that Japan was unlikely to attack from the east. This allowed Stalin to transfer experienced Siberian divisions, troops trained for harsh winter conditions, to reinforce the defense of Moscow. By early December, German reconnaissance units were only a short distance from the city. Some soldiers claimed they could see Moscow's skyline in the distance. Yet victory remained just out of reach. Temperatures plunged far below freezing, catching German forces unprepared for the brutal winter. Vehicles became difficult to operate, equipment failed in the extreme cold, and exhausted troops struggled to maintain their advance. On December 5, 1941, the Red Army launched a powerful counteroffensive. Three Siberian divisions, supported by modern T-34 tanks, struck the overstretched German lines with remarkable determination. The surprise attack forced Germany onto the defensive and marked the first major setback of Hitler's Eastern campaign. The dream of capturing Moscow before winter had vanished. Despite this failure, Hitler remained convinced that victory was still possible. In 1942, he shifted his attention south, seeking control of the Soviet Union's vital oil fields while ordering another ambitious objective, the capture of Stalingrad. Situated on the Volga River, the city held industrial importance and carried enormous symbolic value because it bore Stalin's name. What followed became one of history's most intense urban battles. German troops advanced block by block through shattered streets as Soviet defenders resisted from factories, apartment buildings, and hidden positions among the ruins. Every neighborhood became fiercely contested, and neither side was willing to surrender the city. As the struggle consumed more soldiers and resources, another Soviet plan was quietly taking shape beyond the battlefield. While German forces remained focused on the city itself, powerful Soviet armies assembled on the exposed flanks. The battle for Stalingrad was approaching a dramatic turning point, one that would permanently alter the balance of the war and expose the growing limits of Germany's military power. The battle for Stalingrad reached its decisive moment in Noviembre de 1942. While German forces remained locked in fierce fighting inside the city, Soviet commanders executed a carefully planned counteroffensive that targeted the weaker Romanian and Hungarian units guarding Germany's flanks. Instead of attacking the strongest positions, they struck where resistance was weakest, surrounding the German Sixth Army in one of the most remarkable operations of the Second World War. Within days, nearly 250,000 German soldiers found themselves trapped. Some commanders urged an immediate breakout while escape was still possible, but Adolf Hitler refused to authorize a withdrawal. Confident that the Luftwaffe could supply the encircled army by air, he ordered the troops to hold their positions at all costs. The reality proved very different. Severe winter weather, Soviet air defenses, and limited transport capacity meant only a fraction of the required supplies reached the surrounded forces. As weeks passed, conditions inside the pocket steadily deteriorated. Rescue attempts from outside failed to break through the Soviet defenses, and the encircled army became increasingly isolated. On January 31, 1943, General Friedrich Paulus surrendered. The fall of Stalingrad marked far more than the loss of a single army. It shattered the image of German invincibility and gave the Soviet Union a powerful psychological and strategic advantage that would influence every campaign that followed. Although Germany had suffered a devastating defeat, Hitler still believed he could regain the initiative. His next plan focused on a large Soviet bulge around the city of Kursk. By launching simultaneous attacks from the north and south, German forces hoped to encircle Soviet armies and restore momentum on the Eastern Front. For this offensive, Germany introduced powerful new Panther and Tiger tanks, expecting their superior firepower to overcome Soviet defenses. However, Soviet intelligence had already uncovered the German plan. Under the leadership of Marshal Georgy Zhukov, the Red Army transformed the Kursk region into one of the most heavily fortified battlefields in history. Deep defensive belts, anti-tank obstacles, extensive minefields, and carefully positioned artillery awaited the advancing German forces. When Operation Citadel began in July 1943, the attackers faced resistance unlike anything they had previously encountered. The fighting reached its peak near Prokhorovka, where hundreds of tanks clashed across the battlefield in one of history's largest armored engagements. Despite determined German assaults, Soviet defenses absorbed the attacks before launching powerful counteroffensives. Germany suffered heavy losses in experienced crews, armored vehicles, and valuable equipment that could no longer be replaced at the same pace. After Kursk, the balance of the war shifted permanently. Germany would never again launch a major strategic offensive on the Eastern Front. From that point forward, the Red Army steadily advanced westward, reclaiming occupied territory and forcing German forces into an increasingly desperate retreat. Operación Barbarroja had begun with extraordinary confidence, promising a swift victory that seemed unstoppable during its opening months. Yet the vast distances of the Soviet Union, determined resistance, industrial strength, and a series of crucial strategic decisions gradually turned Germany's greatest offensive into its greatest military failure. The battles of Moscow, Stalingrado, and Kursk became defining moments not only of the Eastern Front but of the entire Second World War. Together, they demonstrated that wars are not won by early victories alone, but by endurance, leadership, and the ability to adapt when history takes an unexpected turn. Their legacy continues to remind us how a single campaign can alter the destiny of nations and reshape the course of the modern world.